Hello again, everybody. This is going to be a tutorial on how we can add a little bit of a wrinkle to add a little bit of interesting kind of inverted positive negative space on our previous positive and negative space images. What I'm going to have you guys do is, just like me, we're going to open up some of the JPEG images that we made initially using our positive and negative space with the scatter brush. So I've got my diver, I have my self-portrait, I have my set of archers. I'll go ahead and do the baseball pitcher as well. So I'm going to open all of these JPEGs up. And then the only thing that I want to play around with is whether or not I'd like to have part of the image flipped. So if I look at the diver, perhaps I would like to have an area of the image inverted. This one doesn't have anything really happening in the background, but if I were to ask for, there's my layers window, F7, okay. If I ask for an invert adjustment layer, that's showing me the opposite of what I had. So I could try something like this. I could try to make it look like maybe she's overlapping with the pool a bit. So I'm going to press the delete key from the invert. So then what you end up getting, I mean, it doesn't perspective-wise look correct yet, but what you end up getting is the opposite wherever the mask is white and the normal image where the mask is black. You can also invert the mask, change white to black and black to white by pressing Ctrl+I. Okay? So perhaps I want to have this, but I want to adjust my mask. I'm going to press Ctrl+T, and that's going to let me hold down my Control key to adjust the perspective. Okay, maybe I just want that to look like maybe there's a big pool below. Could be something as simple as that. With the baseball player, maybe I would want a horizon line where the outfield stands are. So I'm going to make a rectangular selection with my rectangle marquee tool. And I'm going to go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and I'm going to ask for Invert again. Horizon. Yep. So now we are getting some separation. All right. Again, I don't know that from this point of view the pitcher would have a straight line behind him. You know, if I press Ctrl+T, I may want to again adjust the perspective. Maybe it would be going off at an angle. And I can maybe even make it look like the bleachers if I lower this down. You know, maybe something like that. It looks like the outfield fence or first baseline or the dugout. I don't know. I could even lower it down a bunch. Maybe it just looks like the first baseline. So I'm holding Control so that I can resize that. But I like the idea of this whole area here being the opposite. That's fun. Now with my selfie, I could play around with even having creative subdivision on my face, and let me show you what I mean. If I ask for an invert adjustment layer, white becomes black, black becomes white, I could creatively decide to have certain areas included or excluded. So let me press the delete key. Okay. So now that's what I have. All right, where the mask is black, it is showing the normal image, and where it is white, it is inverting it. But remember, Ctrl+I inverts your colors, so now the mask is doing the opposite. Now also I can press Ctrl+T to transform the mask. You can see that's changing how it appears. Alright. If you want to see a more concrete example of this, you can press Ctrl+J to duplicate your layer and Ctrl+I to invert your layer, and then you can play around with just selectively erasing. If I use a big block eraser, very firm, very hard, maybe I'll do a big giant circular eraser right here. Maybe I want to do kind of a creative set of little erased dots. So I'll erase from here and there. The only difference being these circular erasings that I do, they're permanent, whereas the mask, if I did a similar approach with a invert mask, let me go ahead and delete the mask, we'll make a brand new one, and I'll erase from the mask instead. That gives me the flexibility to make changes. Okay, so if I realize I want to make changes, I can go B for brush, make sure I have a, I'm not going to use my scatter brush on this one, I'll go back to my solid hard round brush. Then I have little overlapping areas where the inversion changes. Even switch back to the eraser and make little concentric designs. I'll bring that back in. So without the picture, all that's really happening is I've made this interesting layout. Now if I show it to you over a solid white page, that's what the invert masking circular painting and erasing is. And on the image it looks like this. Or if I hit Ctrl+I and invert it, it does that. I think that looks kind of cool. But you can do this to kind of show off or highlight certain areas. If we want it to look like these archers are all standing on a shooting line, maybe I will take my polygon lasso and click from the bottom corner up along their feet, up and back. I'll make just a little selection here and I'll ask this to invert. Alright, and then if I want a horizon line, I will go ahead and make a rectangle marquee selection. So where the land meets the sky, that's our horizon. I will delete that from the mask of the invert. Looks pretty cool. Now, I can always delete more if I want it to look like the horizon is further down the page. And all I'm doing is deleting from the mask. And again, if I want to see it in the opposite form, Ctrl+I will flip the contents of the mask. Black becomes white, white becomes black. Either one is fine. In any event, I'm going to save each of these as invert. Just name it that. And they were JPEGs, but now that I have these fun adjustment layers on top, it's going to prompt me when I save to save them as PSDs, which I am fine with. So I will call it invert, file, save, invert. And then this one will be saved as diver, invert, yeah, invert diver. Awesome. Right. So play with that concept a bit. You could even just play with duplicating, Ctrl+J and Ctrl+I to invert. You could invert your images to see how they look. You could do something totally different. For instance, maybe I want to do like some creative like vertical bars. I'm going to ask this to create a clipping mask on my inverted layer, and then we're seeing that. And again, you guessed it, if I want to see the opposite, I hit Ctrl+I and it will invert the selection. So you can do something to add more detail to the image, or you can just do something fun and creative with it. Save my image. Let me go ahead and export as a quick PNG or save as and then change to JPEG. I'm ready to update Google Classroom and my sketchbook.